Okay, this is the first lab in Physics 115, and it's designed for you to see what the data looks like as something plummets to the ground and to measure the acceleration of gravity and to learn Excel. Okay, a large part of this is also learning Excel, and these are what we call ribbons. On each ribbon are the various functions. So the first one would be home. This is where you're going to do most of your work on. The next one would be insert, where you're going to insert things like a spreadsheet, screenshot, work art, all those kinds of cool things. Symbols, equations, whatever. The next one is page layout. What are your margins? Are your portrait or landscape? Do you want to include page breaks so you see exactly how your spreadsheet breaks out? The next page is the function page that you're going to be using. Insert a function, look at the formula list. Can it help you? Review the data, sort the data. Look at the view. The next one is the data table. This where you can sort it alphabetically, numerically. You can change data into text and vice versa. You can remove duplications. You can validate the data. You can use pivot tables. Those are very complex functions that as you advance in your knowledge and need of Excel, you can build more and more complex spreadsheets. You can also access from a database like Access. The last one is the review. Check your spelling, look up synonyms, look at workbook statistics, check your validity, translate languages. All those things are possible, and you might want to play with the functions as you're learning Excel and you improve in your ability. Okay, if you look in the extracted manual, you'll see it was written in Excel 2007. The ribbons didn't change that much between 2007 and 2013 or 16, and since it's a massive project, I chose not to do it until I had to go online. So if you have an older version of Excel, here's what your things look like, and here's what the ribbons look like. Over on the right side, you see the statistical analysis page that went along with your first problem set to tell you how the statistics work, why the statistics work, some information on it, because you don't necessarily have statistics coming into this course. Over here you see what the finished spreadsheet would look like based on the data you see between it and the beginning part of the manual. So you notice that Excel works in columns A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, and then rows. So what I've done is list the rows here. You won't see it. It just tells you where each thing is located. And so I put a grid so it's easier to spot the data. You'll be putting the data from this curve between the two pages into column C. That's real data extracted from a student last semester. It's not the one you see here, but it'll be very close because gravity is pretty constant. So the only difference would be how that spark timer worked on that particular tape. What you see on the time one is 2 decimal places, but it's actually out to 8 decimal places because each one represents 1/60th. What it's doing is taking the dot number and multiplying by 1 over the frequency of the spark. So this will give you a real good counting pattern. And then what the next line does, change displacement, it takes the line 13, subtracts it from line 12 on column C, and then it takes whatever that answer is and divides it by 1/60th or multiplies by 60, same thing. Then it takes the difference between, on column E, the 13 minus the 12, and you have the change in velocity. Then you have a rounding function with a division or division by 1/60th or multiplication by 60 to get the acceleration. Because we know the accuracy at this point is kind of crap, so we're down basically to perhaps 2 to 3 significant figures. We take the time column and square it for column H, and column I is we take our velocity in E and we multiply it by our time in column B to get the area underneath the curve. On line 42, we sum up each of the columns. Line 43, we average the acceleration. This is usually within maybe 10 to 15% of the true value unless we got extremely crappy data. Now, what you're going to see is you're comparing the average versus the regression. The regression is how far are you from a straight line fit, and as you can see here, this is 11 versus under 1%. So the regression using standard analysis techniques is actually pretty good. Your slope is calculating the best fit of velocity versus time graph. Intercept is where you think it would intercept at time equals 0 based on the data. You'll be also learning how to graph this. So in this case, I tell you what cell to go to, what to type in each cell. Of course, you're not Jane Q student, so please type your own name there. I tell you how to type a series of words and then use data text to columns to separate all those words into columns in Excel, a very useful thing, so you don't have to go to column A and type it in, then to column B. You can take it from a Word document that you've copied and punch it in easily and separate it. And I've indicated the arrows. And admittedly, a lot of this is in 2007. Some of this was converted to 2016. It depended on the nature of the function. Okay, so now we're gone to the next one, and I'm showing you on the home page of 2007 virtually where everything is. Guess what? It's virtually on the same thing on 13 and 16. They didn't want to change the home page very much, except now that they put the save command on the toolbar. Before, you had to go into that little caret up here to do the other stuff. And you can customize your own toolbar to have more commands on it, which is kind of cool. So every instruction, what column to go to, what to click, is all on the instructions. Even if you know what you're doing, please don't deviate too much unless there's some kind of fluke. This was written for PC, Excel, not Mac, so Mac's kind of a step down because Bill Gates doesn't like you. Okay, again over here you see more instructional commands. Each of these commands are repeated and repeated so they become automatic. And as you notice on B13 you see $E, $6. That makes the cell absolute. You can make that cell absolute by hitting the F4 function. And that means it won't change when you copy. So you can refer every single cell back to one cell. That's a really cool function. And I have instructions here. And of course I called it cool stuff because, hey, I'm old. In the 60s, everything was cool, except what we didn't like. Okay, these are more commands. They're virtually the same in 13 and 16. Formatting is the same. At the very basis of Excel, even 16, you're going to get things like you see at the top of the first page on the left. These come from, believe it or not, 1993. when they were using Windows 3.1, which is the first functional basis of Windows and Office, believe it or not. And I have the spreadsheet command, I have the math formula. I tell you what each column and cell is doing as you go through it. I've circled this. To recreate this in 16 would have taken massive amounts of time, and it wouldn't have achieved very much because they're virtually the same. So go through line by line, see what each formula does, and think about how you can mechanize your math or your chemistry or anything where you have to do statistics using Excel, which is functionally available. Google spreadsheet can do some of this, it can't do all of this. Older versions of Excel in some cases are more powerful than the new ones because they took out some of the functionality to make it prettier. Okay, it shows you the function key, it shows you the round function. Believe it or not, the very basic level, that's still there, but you can access it from the toolbar and insert. Okay, you see the summation commands, then we go to the naming box. The naming box changes from version to version to version. Look on the ribbon for Name Manager on your particular version of Excel. This lets you type in a name instead of a column bracket. Is it useful? Yes. If you're really good at it, do you tend to use it? No. But it lets someone looking at your thing understand what you're doing more cleverly, because if you say velocity versus time, it's a little easier than understanding a series of numbers versus each other. Your choice. The only problem is if you go to edit, you have to rename it. That's a problem. Okay. I indicate the name box where you can see it if you've named it. Then we look at slope and intercept, how to use them, how to make a number absolute. You can turn all of these into percentages by hitting the percent key. No need to multiply anything by 100%. And then that little characteristic under save would be invalid. You can actually save from above with that little disk that's really, really old from the 80s. And at the end, this is what your spreadsheet should look like. Very nice and clean on one page. You can scale this, and it was processed from the data you see on the right-hand side. So now you're an advanced beginner if you did all this from scratch. But you now need to learn how to do graphing techniques.